Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, I'm ItFightsBack, and today I'm going to be showcasing and going over my Bodyswap Ignite Necromancer build I created in Solo Self-Found. Now, this build does a lot of things, and it is mainly built around the Utula's Hunger Majestic Plate that I use to stack a bunch of other gear to allow me to go Mind Over Matter, Eldritch Battery, and then also capping my attack and spell block while using a staff, as long as I have my Bone Offering up. So I'm in a Drox map T16 with life as extra energy shield, and we're going to blast through this map so I can show you what's going on here. It's very jumpy, kind of like a Flicker Strike. The worst thing is fire and ignite resistant enemies, but everything should just die pretty quickly in this map. If I want to do big damage, I have to spawn my own corpses, and otherwise I can just bounce from enemy to enemy with Bodyswap and it will ignite and destroy enemies. But I can spawn corpses and absolutely roast stuff. The degen is pretty insane, and the more enemies the more stuff you can just bounce between and keep up the Bone Offering. And then I have block capped. I've got like 6,700 effective HP, and it's real hard to kill a build that is block capped with that much effective. And I have insane life and energy shield recovery all the way across the build. I'm consuming corpses like constantly, not only with the Bodyswap, but also with the Beast of Flesh that comes from the Devouring Diadem helmet that I'm using. So it's really easy to get flash charges for my Cinder Swallow Urn. And it's just fantastic. It's really fun to play. I've never seen a build put together like this. It's really opened up by Utula's Hunger, which I will explain in full as I go over the gear. But now we've got a boss, and Maven's going to bring in other bosses here. Make sure the Bone Offering is up. Drop my curses finally. There's one boss down. Curses need to get over here on this one, and then there he goes. Oh, Rigwald doesn't want to play nice. He switched forms to avoid death. Okay, there he goes. Bye-bye. Now, for Drox with extra energy shield. Drox is awful with energy shield because when he gets inside his banners, he's going to have damage immunity. So I have to be able to drain his energy shield and kill him here. So this is like the worst Drox you can imagine, pretty much. Keep my curses up, and I also have Cremation for extra. A little bit of single target, but I got his energy shield off, and now he's going to start seemingly die way quicker. But I got to destroy these banners really quick to keep him from generating that energy shield. And we should have made it through the first phase there. Yeah. Just blast away. Just go. There it is. He's dead. That's the boss. So it's a lot going on, which I'll explain through all of it. But it is a very fun build, and built probably in a way you've never seen a build built before. Now, actually building this in Solo Self-Found turned out to be quite an issue. And the way most Solo Self-Found builds work, the story of the journey to creating it is a big part of the build. So I will start with that. I found this staff in a heist blueprint. +3 all fire skill gems, cast speed, flat fired spells, big fire damage, and burning damage. And then I decided, you know what? Okay, maybe this league I will build something around that. I then acquired a replica Dragonfang's Flight. I decided I was going to divine it until I hit a fire spell gem. And in doing so, I spent 17 divines, and the first fire spell I hit was Bodyswap. So that is kind of how the build idea came together, and I was like, okay, I can use Utula's Hunger, and that should make for a fun and interesting build. So that is what happened. I then crafted gear using dense fossils to make sure they could not roll life modifiers on all of these pieces. Got huge energy shield boots, huge energy shield on gloves, and a crystal belt to give me as much energy shield as I could get. I originally had other rings as well as a helmet, but then as things started to get more optimized, this helmet opened up quite a bit as I got more reservation efficiency off of the helmet, as well as Eldritch Battery. So this helmet only saved me 2 passives for Eldritch Battery, but saved me a lot more with the reservation efficiency for my auras. Another thing about this helmet is it triggers Feast of Flesh every 5 seconds. So when I have corpses down, it will absorb them every 5 seconds, like so. And what that does is I gain energy shield per corpse consumed, mana per corpse consumed, and life per corpse consumed. And it consumes up to 10. So that is a lot of life and energy shield recovery if that is sucking up a bunch of corpses. The downside to that is it can get rid of my corpses when I'm trying to body swap. So there are times where I need to actually cast more corpses more frequently, especially on a single target, where before I got the helmet, I could just drop a bunch of corpses and just keep spamming them away on a boss. So consuming corpses like this, it gives me tons of life recovery, but gotta do a little bit of extra work. So then the last 2 pieces of the build were the Replica Emberwake, which I started farming blueprints for. This reduces my ignite duration, but causes ignites to deal damage way faster. And then there's the Polaric Devastation Ring. In my left ring slot, this covers enemies in ash for 5 seconds when I ignite them, while also increasing duration of ailments. Covering an enemy in ash increases the fire damage taken by that enemy. And increasing the duration of my ignites here works nicely with the Replica Emberwake, because the more duration I can stack on the ignites, the longer they will last, and help to offset the 90% reduced ignite duration on here. Now, the great thing about both of these rings is there are no life modifiers on them, so they worked really nicely in this build. So I can't have any life modifiers on any of my gear, yet I have over 4,000 life. That's because I get a big chunk of life if there's no life modifiers on other equipped gear. So we have achieved that with this build. So making solid use of this while still having a life focused build, and then using all that energy shield to work with mind over matter, and then make sure I don't have to really worry too much about mana costs of skills at all. And then across all the rest of my gear, I capped up resistances where I could. I got a bunch of fire resistance on the rings, as well as a bunch of extra cold on this one. This helmet hit lightning and chaos. I needed a bunch of cold and lightning res on this belt, and that's what I hit with that. And a little bit of resistances here, and a little bit of resistances here. And I'm also using Purity of Elements to make me ailment immune and give me a bunch of extra resistances there. I'm also running Discipline and Malevolence as my other 2 auras. Now, there are other body swap builds going around this league. Some are Elementalists, some are Inquisitors, and most are Chieftains. Now, being a Necromancer made this build really strange. The reason I was going with the Necromancer here was thinking that if I'm going to make a corpse build, I want to get the increased area effect. If there's a corpse nearby, enemies deal less damage and take more damage. I get attack and cast speed per corpse consumed recently, and enemies near corpses I spawned recently are chilled and shocked. So I can chill and shock, and with a Feast of Flesh and me bopping around all the time, I'm getting tons of extra attack and cast speed from that with the Feast of Flesh. Also here, the big thing is I wanted Essence Glutton. For each nearby corpse, you and nearby allies regenerate 0.2% of energy shield per second, and I regenerate 8% of my energy shield and 4% of mana over 2 seconds when I consume a corpse. So I have to consume a corpse every 2 seconds, which that's not hard. Every time I do, that gives me 8% energy shield regen. So it is very difficult to drain my energy shield. I'm not relying just on the energy shield recharge. I have that energy shield there. I get energy shield from Feast of Flesh from the helmet, and I'm also getting energy shield on kill from the Cinder Swallow Urn that I got, which was all pretty awesome. And then the other thing is Mistress of Sacrifice. This allows offering skills to also affect you. This is how I'm using my Bone Offering to give me a bunch of attack and spell block. So when that is up, I'm 65, 69 block. I'm getting the rest of that from my Rumi's Concoction. That's how I'm getting 75, 75 block. Those things both have to be in action, but without the Bone Offering, it gets pretty bad. It'll drop off here in just a second. And 39 attack block, 43 spell block. That's with a lot of investment into block on my passive tree. Now, the offering skills have reduced effect on me here, but I get increased skill effect duration as part of that. So it will stick around a lot longer, so I don't have to use it all the time while I'm clearing maps. It lasts for 12.2 seconds. There is a belt that would allow you to do that as well, though also reducing the duration of offerings, so you can't keep it up quite as long as I can being a necromancer. So before I jump into the passive tree, I'll go over the gym links here. I have my Bodyswap, which is gaining 3 levels from the staff and 3 levels from the Dragonfang's Flight. So it's up to a level 27 Bodyswap. It is a 2120 Bodyswap corrupted +1. In here, I have a combustion, so enemies ignited have -10 to fire resistance, plus the 25% chance to ignite is very helpful. I have an awakened burning damage, which will give an additional level on to the Bodyswap once it reaches level 5. Anomalous ignite proliferation. This gives increased area of effect and causes my ignites to spread to other enemies. A swift affliction, which lowers the duration of ailments, but the ignites still last over 2 seconds because of the awakened unbound ailments, increasing the duration of my ailments by quite a bit and giving me more damage with ailments. So all of this stuff is stacking extra damage on the Bodyswap. So I have a second 6 link with the Utula's Hunger, in which I have a cremation, immolate, causing it to add extra flat fire against burning enemies, elemental focus, which means that cremation cannot actually ignite, cruelty for extra hit damage, faster casting so I can get them down faster, and then fire penetration on those because cremation launches a bunch of balls, and then faster casting launches them all faster. It's not something I need to use often anymore because I'm getting so much damage out of the ignites with the Polaric Devastation and Replica Emberwake. In my helmet, I have my Purity of Elements, Malevolence, and Discipline so that they get the increased reservation efficiency from the helmet, and I have my Frostblink socketed in here. I have my Bone Offering linked with increased duration to help that last longer. I don't have to use it as often because I don't have a way to automatically trigger it. A lot of builds you will see using offerings will have it like being triggered via the weapon, but since I'm using a staff, I don't quite have that freedom, especially since my staff has its mods full. I also have Desecrate here linked with Spell Cascade, so it casts 3 times and gets as many corpses out as possible with 1 cast. That is nice. And in my gloves, I have a Steel Skin just for some extra defense when I run around. Another 2,209 damage I can take on top of everything else. Also can remove bleed. And then I have flammability and elemental weakness linked with Arcanist Brand so that I can just cast that down. It'll put the curses down, last a little bit for single target. For clearing maps, I really don't need it. For single target at this point, I almost don't need it, but it gets it done. Then my Replica Dragonfang's Flight is anointing dirty techniques, which causes damaging ailments to deal damage faster, further stacking on what the Replica Emberwake is doing. That is qualityed up with elemental damage, turbulent catalysts, which scales the ignite damage faster from 45% to 54%, and it's a pretty insane roll that I was able to hit with the Divine in solo self-found. And I boosted the resistances on the Polaric Devastation, and I boosted defenses on the Crystal Belt with the catalysts. For my flasks, I'm gaining charges when I'm hit by an enemy for my Divine Flask. It also removes Corrupting Blood and Bleed. I'm also gaining charges when I'm hit on my Quartz Flask to reduce effective curses on me during its effect. Cinder Swallow Urn causes a percentage of damage taken from hits to be leached as life during effect. Enemies ignited by me during the effect take 8% that can roll up to 10% increased damage, and I recover a percentage of energy shield when I kill an enemy during effect. That can also roll up to 3%, but it's also not necessary. The big thing here is it recharges 5 charges when you consume an ignited corpse, and it costs a lot of charges to use. So it uses 114 of the 150 charges, but like I mentioned, with the Feast of Flesh, and if I'm popping around bopping a lot of enemies, there's going to be a lot of ignited corpses on the ground, considering ignite damage is how I'm doing all of my damage. So I'm consuming lots of ignited corpses when this happens, and it also turns all of my ignites green when that is in use as well, which is pretty nifty. For my enchant on my boots, I'm getting 120% increased critical strike chance. If I haven't crit recently, this helps get elemental overload up while clearing and against bosses. I want to crit every 8 seconds, ideally to get elemental overload up because that's a lot more damage. And I have enough chance to ignite on my passive tree given the 10% on the amulet and 25% chance on combustion that I don't need to do crits in order to get my ignites off. So it allows me to use elemental overload. I'm also getting a little bit of increased effect of bone offering, and I have a chance to avoid being poisoned here as well. Now when I get poisoned, that is still going to come from my life, and I don't have the greatest amount of chaos resistance on my gear. I'm actually sitting at minus 20 on the chaos res. So I don't want to get poisoned, but if I can avoid about half of the poisons, that's pretty solid, and it won't cause me too many issues, but most enemies die before they can be poisoned. And then on my gloves, I am inflicting fire exposure on hit, applying minus 11 to fire resistance, and against unique enemies, I have extra 21% fire damage over time multiplier, and I'm triggering Commandment of Reflection when hit that summons a copy of myself that can distract enemies. It's really about the best glove enchant you can get, and helm enchant. The one I found for the build was Bodyswap cast speed. Getting a helm enchant in solo self-found is quite the grind. But speaking of quite the grind, to get this Polaric Devastation to drop, I had to farm 50 black stars to get this to drop. So SSF things there. But then let's get into the passive tree. So I am coming up through all of this energy shield at the Necromancer's start because increases to spell damage do not affect the ignites from Bodyswap. So if targeting a corpse, the corpse will also explode, dealing damage around it that is not affected by modifiers to spell damage. So if I want to scale the ignite, I need fire damage or elemental damage. Both of those will work. So if I were to push through the spell damage at the start, these are wasted nodes on this build. So getting extra energy shield here helps boost the survivability of the build, get practical application for strength and dexterity, as I go through pretty great lengths to get strength and dexterity to work with this build. And that is given that items and gems have reduced attribute requirements from the Dragonfang's flight as well. Heart and Soul is 8% life and a bit of increased mana. I'm really only using this for the life, but for 2 points, 5% life, 8% life is really strong. Here I have a tattoo. Like I mentioned, strength and dexterity. This is giving me 4 all attributes instead of the 10 intelligence that it was originally. So then right over here on this right side of the tree is a lot of important things. As I push up here for Searing Heat, ignites you inflict, deal damage 15% faster, 5% faster, and a 15% chance to ignite here. So now, given the 35 I had on my gear and the gem, this gets me up to 50. And coming down here, these 2 nodes in this wheel for Undertaker causes corpse you spawn to have 5% increased maximum life. These 2 passive nodes are mandatory. I would say if you're trying to get the most damage out of a corpse build, you have to scale that damage, and these are the only 2 nodes that exist to do so, unless there's something on Cluster Jewels. I'm also getting 20% increased effective offerings here with the Mastery. That helps scale the block I'm getting from the Bone Offering. Undertaker causes Desecrate and Unearth to have +2 to the maximum number of corpses allowed, which lets me get more out. Desecrate says here it has a maximum of 10 corpses allowed, but when you hover over the icon for the skill, it has up to 12. So it actually makes all 3 casts of the spell cascade put something down. It summons 5 corpses each for the 3 cascades. So you might be able to see it when I cast here. 3 of the corpses from the first cast in the spell cascade get removed so that 5 spawn on the 3rd. It goes up in this green smoke when you put them down, so you can't tell super easily, but unless you were able to increase the maximum number of corpses to 15, that's gonna happen. Then here I'm getting these life and energy shield nodes. A percentage of maximum life is gained as extra energy shield. With melding, getting life and energy shield nodes is very efficient for this build. And I have a jewel here that is giving me increased burning damage and damaging ailments. Deal damage 6% 50% faster to get the most out of each ignite. Pushing up here, I'm getting an additional curse from Whispers of Doom, a little bit of extra curse effect, and curse skills have cast speed. I'm not really using any of these side nodes. I don't think the curse skills have cast speed is really helping me much, but I need the additional curse to get the elemental weakness and the flammability off with the Arcanist brand. And originally I was coming over here just 2 points to get Eldritch Battery, but then the helmet removed the need for that. And then I'm pushing over here to get Written in Blood. This 10 strength matters, absolutely. I don't have it, I need all 10 of those strength. But this is more increased energy shield and life. I originally had these 2 points here, but I dropped those to like rework some of this and get the last bit of attack block. Also over here is Snowforge. Enemies ignited or chilled by you have -5 to elemental resistances. So while this is giving me a bunch of fire damage, this is also lowering enemies' elemental resistances, taking more damage from the ignites, as well as the mastery here to give -18% to the affected resistance. So since my gloves are applying exposure, I can bump that up to -18 instead of the -11 that is shown here. And then I'm coming in here for Growth and Decay. This is some extra life regeneration as well as damage over time multiplier. With one more level, I would probably take this mastery to give me 15% increased duration of ailments on enemies to help the duration of the ignites that I'm like shrinking just about as much as possible. So to the left here is where the tattoos come in. This node has a 2% chance to block spell damage. That originally is 1% chance to block spells, but it is being doubled by the Warrior's Tail jewel that I had to farm all the way to rank 2000 in Trial of the Ancestors to get. But there's not just this one, but there's a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh one of these tattoos. So I am getting 7% spell block from this jewel, being able to hit all of these nodes here, and the extra pathing nodes to the jewel socket are intelligence nodes. So there's only one other node that could hit where I do want to put another tattoo here. So it hits it all. Then these mana nodes here have chance to block spell damage. So you've seen that I'm exactly capped at 75 on spell and attack block. So every piece of spell block I have here absolutely matters. So coming in here to get Mystic Bulwark is for the spell block. These nodes here are spell damage while wielding a staff. Doesn't really help, but here I have 3% spell block for staffs, 6% attack and spell block, and enigmatic defense, and then another 3% attack block here. Firewalker gives me increased fire damage and cast speed with fire skills, a little bit of fire resistance. Pushing down there is really nice. Then up at the top here, I push up and get Breath of Flames and Heart of Flame. So the left side is all just increased fire damage, but I need increased fire damage. That's how I'm scaling my Ignite. Spell damage won't do it. And then on the right side is Fire Dot Multi, and here is another 30% chance to Ignite, getting me up to 80%, and more duration of my Ignites, and then more fire damage and Fire Dot Multi in Breath of Flames. Cruel Preparation gives me a little bit of resistances and life. I have Unnatural Calm for a bit of extra energy shield. Another lightning resistance here. Continuing across the top, I have 3 all resistance and 3 all resistance tattoos on both of these. There's another 3 all res here into the Fire Dot Multi, 20% chance to Ignite. That gets me to 100% chance to Ignite, and then more fire resistance and Fire Dot Multi. Down here is 4 to all attributes for that strength and dexterity, more life and energy shield with the chaos resistance, purity of flesh. Coming down here, I come up and grab Righteous Army and Spiritual Aid. Increases and reductions to minion damage also affect you. So that makes any minion damage I get just an increased damage modifier for me. That will further scale the ignites because it is not spell damage. And that works nicely given the Necromancer Ascendancy, as I'm getting minion steal increased damage on all of these nodes. So all of that damage then will affect me. So Spiritual Aid wound up being really nice, and I get an extra 1% life regen by going from the right side here. A lot of extra damage there. Then I'm getting a bunch of life regeneration in Surge of Vigor, mostly so that I can have nearby enemies have 50% reduced life regeneration rate. So enemies that have life regen directly counteracts the degen from ignites, so this helps to counteract that. And then there was another 4 all attributes here. This was the last intelligence node before I push down here into strength nodes, and I grabbed Devotion here for some extra life, and then the staff block nodes, +3 for attack and spell block on the small nodes, and +6 attack and spell block on Whirling Barrier, as well as a 20% chance to gain a power charge when you block. Getting power charges is nice because that causes extra crits, which helps to proc Elemental Overload. So if I work my way back over here, pushing down here, I have another 4 all attributes, Elemental Overload. As long as I deal a critical strike in the past 8 seconds, I'm doing 40% more elemental damage with hits and ailments. So that works with ignites, though ailments never count as being from critical strikes. That's why I needed the 100% ignite chance. And up here is just some damage over time multiplier, another spot that I could get the increased skill effect duration and duration of ailments. For all attributes with a tattoo, for all attributes, 3% all res, another jewel with fire dot multi and fire damage, and then I have Mind Over Matter, causing 40% of damages taken from mana before life, but with Eldritch Battery, Energy Shield is protecting mana, so it's coming from the Energy Shield instead of the mana. Really cool how this works. So an issue a lot of builds that try to do Eldritch Battery Mind Over Matter encounter, that is, if you get hit a lot, you are going to run out of Energy Shield, and then you will not be able to cast skills anymore until the ES recovers. That's why I've gotten so much stuff to boost my energy shield recovery as possible with Essence Glutton and the Feast of Flesh from the Devouring Diadem. It works very nicely. Even the energy shield when you kill, it's coming from all angles, and if I haven't taken damage recently, the energy shield will just recharge anyways. And then given all of that recovery rate being capped on attack and spell block, makes it really hard for the energy shield to run down. Now, for a single target hit using Eldritch Battery Mind Over Matter, you can calculate the threshold for energy shield and mana. So currently I have 4,093 life. If I multiply that times 0.8, that gives me 3,274. If I had more than 3,274 energy shield and I got one shot, I would end up having energy shield left over. So since my energy shield is below that number, I can actually calculate my effective HP by just adding the life and the energy shield plus the unreserved mana, because that does factor in if you're going to get one shot, but it's hard to get one shot with 6,692 effective HP. And that is the build. And then for cosmetics, I really built this around the 3D item art of the Utula's Hunger. I equipped gear to kind of go with that and fit the theme of the body swap. When you body swap, you get covered in blood, and I've got like blood erupting from my staff, and I really built the cosmetics to kind of go with that. The whole build in general just kind of fits the theme of Utula, so I thought that was really cool all the way around with that. So I've got a Scourge weapon on the staff with the Vol weapon effect, some Infernal gloves and Infernal boots, Bloodguard wings, a blood letter of the Vol apparition, and glowing red eyes with twisted horns to add to the Devouring Diadem look on the helmet. All right, I think that covers everything. Now I'm going to pop into Path of Building here and look at mainly this corpse life number and explain where I got that from to give this 4.6 million ignite duration. It is really tricky to figure out what corpse life is, and this number could be wrong. If someone knows better, definitely put it in the comments down below. What I did here is I went to PoEDB and I looked up Primal Crush Claw, which is the corpse that I'm spawning with my Desecrate. And then there are 3 different options here. This is a Spectre version. I know the percentage life here for corpse is supposed to be 360%. So that's why I went with this one, because both of these show 510% on the life. That is what is shown in this really old, like a year and a half old corpse life calculations guide I found in the forums using this 30% life specters, but there were more corpse life nodes back then, so this isn't accurate. But given that this 360% life is there, it gives this life number 127,062, and it is taking the base stat from the monster. It is multiplying it by that 360% and then multiplying it by a map multiplier to get the corpse life at the various levels here. So in monster level 84, we've got this 127,000. Then on my tree, I have this 10% increased life from corpses. So I added an extra 10% to that, and that is the number I put in here for enemy corpse life. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It feels about like that from what I've seen in clearing maps, and like that Drox absolutely melted. Like, I assume this is probably pretty close to accurate, but I'm not 100% sure. But I wanted to walk through the process and how I got this number, because like this value changes everything. Like if I drop this to 39,000, the damage drops to 1,000,000 on the Ignite DPS. So everything here is hinging on that number. I don't think POB knows how to calculate it. Like, I don't know where it's getting this corpse number from, but I'm definitely not doing only 500k Ignite DPS. So I have that number in there. You know how I got it, whether it's right or wrong. There it is. The self-explosion without factoring in the corpse life, it does way less damage. The corpse explosion does a lot, which really factors in the increased levels from the body swap, because that keeps stepping up the percentage of the corpse's life factored into the explosion with each level. And I will have the path of building link in the video description if you want to take a look at it for yourself. And then if you're trying to go for like maximum damage on this, you would prefer to have a replica Dragonfang's Flight that gives you +3 to the level of unearthed gems, and then spawn corpses with unearth. And then if you scale enough levels on that, you can get high enough corpse to have more life than I can get with these. But this works for this build. It's more of a map clearer than a bossing type build, and this gets it done. But that's all I've got for this guide. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the like button, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe, make sure you don't miss more videos from me. If you'd like to help support my channel, please consider using the super thanks to the heart icon just below the video, or by joining to become a member. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.